season 2011-12 was one of the most incredible seasons in the history of Scottish football, with the death of one of our largest clubs. The 10 seasons that followed were an amazing 10 years in the history of Celtic Football Club, with 4 consecutive trebles, one of which was an invincible treble. And it all ended with a worldwide pandemic that resulted in a worldwide lockdown. This is the fans' story and the fans' recollection of those incredible seasons. You can listen to it every week if you're a paid subscriber to theceltigunderground.substack.com. We hope you enjoy.
Music in my head, crazy music playing in the morning light. Oh, ho, ho, it's magic, you know.
We are now at the 8th season of the 9 in a row. At the time, we didn't know it would be the 8th season, season 2018-19, and it's quite a tumultuous season, and it really starts before the season starts, or it starts around the time when the season starts, with Brendan Rodgers being very unhappy at the dealings in the transfer window. Offer comes in for Dedryck Boyata, which Boyata wants us to take, and we don't take it. Was this not the season that we had the offer in of £4 million from Chelsea from Craig Gordon, for them to have Craig Gordon as a backup? You know, we've got whatever age he was, 36-year-old goalkeeper.
Craig Gordon wanted to take it. He was fronted up to the press that day.
It made all sense to take that offer, you know, in terms of general scheme of things, and we didn't take it. And so, yes. So you're in the press, Andrew. What, from the outside, it was pretty obvious. I mean, it was pretty obvious that the relationship was breaking down between Brendan and the board. How obvious was that in the press at the time?
I mean, you could tell he was looking for it. I have to say, from the previous January, we all felt it was like an 18-month thing, a wee bit like subsequently Postecoglou. You think, like, after about 18 months, and then the reality hits, because 18 months probably takes you to the end of your second European campaign. And by and large, you're not getting anywhere. And you think, I'm hitting my head off a kind of glass ceiling here. And I'm not going to get like oodles players costing multi-millions. This is probably about as good as it gets. So you can see the trajectory of like Celtic managers getting a wee bit kind of itchy in their chairs from about 18 months. And everybody said it, but we used to get so much stick from supporters. No, Brendan's here for 10 in a row and all this. No, he's not. Like, and some of the, not so much me because I wasn't on Twitter then, but some of the abuse that my colleagues took, one female colleague particularly, like some of the misogynistic abuse, because we were saying, look, you know, all is not well here, and like he's making noises, Rodgers, that he would go with the right offer. Remember the terminado? I can't remember exactly when that was said, the terminado, but I'm sure that was before the start of this season.
Robert, were you? I mean, you know people at Celtic. Was it obvious to you that there was starting to be a breakdown relationship? I remember raising with someone at Celtic the point that every single time Celtic won a trophy, the next day, Brendan would give an interview to a London-based newspaper and not one of the Scottish guys. It was almost as if he was reminding people down south that he was a successful manager, winning stuff. And I think round about that time, the Arsenal job had come up, and Brendan hadn't been a candidate quoted down south in the press. And I always felt that was part of, he started to realise that actually the longer he was away in Scotland, the more he would be forgotten. Were you aware of a sort of breakdown between Brendan and the board at this time?
I'm definitely aware early in this season, early in the Neural season, and particularly after the AEK Athens result in the Champions League, hearing from different channels there was considerable disagreement. I think, as we discussed on the last episode, we had not had a particularly good transfer window in January of 2018, and I think there was maybe a bit of a loss of faith in Brendan's picks in the transfer market, plus maybe some sort of addictive need to keep spending, need to keep improving, to keep trying to compete, because we've been on the end of some very harsh beatings in Europe. So I just, I think the alignment between Peter Lawwell and Brendan Rodgers got less and less. And I think we know at some stage quite early in the 8-in-a-row season, Dermot Desmond was brought in to try and bang their heads together and, try and get them to continue. But, I mean, I guess as we'll talk, the Leicester job was in play for quite a while, and it seemed to be quite a badly kept secret that, Rodgers was one of the preferred candidates, and I guess he was looking to get out. There was all the stuff that came out later about Brendan having had an offer from China. I think that came around about August 2018, maybe just before or just after the AEK Athens fixtures. And for whatever reason he stayed, but he didn't stay long. And I think we knew he wasn't going to stay long. And if we'd been realistic, we should have known on day one that he wasn't going to stay that long. And, we ended up getting a bit more than 2 seasons. And, 7 trophies out of 7. So, you can't argue with some of it. But, it was all disappointing. But, everybody's got their price. You could say the same about Kieran Tierney, who did not take anything like the step for leaving for, the gold coin that Rodgers did. I think, things might have turned out quite differently. As for 9 in a row, if we'd gone for 10 in a row, and, Tierney had still been around, or Moussa Dembele had still been around, Brendan had still been around. So at the end of the day, the common theme has and always will be that there's money in England, and if people are money oriented, then very often they take that choice.
So saying, Robert touched on a point there. So one of the things that I'd heard was that Brendan, when he first came in, was pretty much Dermot's pick and was being allowed to, when Peter was frustrating him, go behind Peter's back and speak direct to Brendan in the first sort of 12, 18 months. But one of the things people continually forget when they blame Peter Lawwell for the strategy for the conservatism of Celtic, Dermot's the major shareholder who makes all decisions, and Peter's only there because he does exactly what Dermot wants him to be doing. Not that he does Dermot's instructions. I mean, like, he behaves as Dermot would want him to behave. And so one of the things I was hearing was in the first year, 18 months, first year or so, Dermot's quite happy for Brendan to be going and every so often when he hits a log jam with Peter to be speaking to him. But eventually Dermot gets a bit pissed off with this. And then the final straw came, Robert, you mentioned the China thing, was he had this offer from China that he didn't want to take. And so, but he's getting so peed off that Peter's not doing the transfer dealings that he wants, that he goes to Dermot and says, I've got this brilliant offer from China. And that Brendan says, fine, take it, and calls his bluff. And at that point, it was just irretrievable. My understanding, and I always felt this was demonstrated by the fact that the winter window was just basically a whole raft of loan transfers, was that everybody had decided in the summer that Brendan was leaving that season. It was just whenever he got a job, we wouldn't stand in his way for him to go, because the relationship had broken down with everybody at that point. And so when he left it, and one of the things I said to you this, we met last night, Saint, I said this to you last night, one of the things I found funny, people were having a go. I remember a day where everybody's having a go online about various things about Peter. And I jokingly said, if you think Peter's bad the way he's dealing with Brendan, if I was in charge, I'd sack him. Like, but in a jokey way, because you wouldn't have sacked him. And then tweeted that in the morning and then go with my work. And then I come back in the evening and put on Twitter, and I have like 1 million notifications, a bit like you were saying, Andrew, about the hatred of people because you said something about Brendan. No, and this is what I always found ironic. So when Brendan eventually leaves, well, we'd all known since the summer, if you had any brain, you knew since the summer he was leaving. So when he left because you knew he was going to leave and you knew the relationship was broken down. And all these people who were vitriolic to me that summer, because I said I'd fire him, were calling him the rat. And we're, doing drawings of him being hung and all that type of stuff. And you think how utterly two-faced.
Oh, yeah.
That, and I remember getting a phone call from someone within Celtic, or not specifically about this, but in the phone call they said, look, you've got a bit of presence online. Any way you can try and tell people to stop singing Brendan Rodgers is here for 10 in a row, because he's not. Right? So saying, the thing that really got me when he eventually left was, it just seemed to me that I thought everybody knew he was leaving. So I couldn't understand why it came as a surprise when he did.
Well, you were keeping me up to date with what you were hearing, but as a normal fan who apart from yourself doesn't have any contacts. I mean, Andrew's got he was in the business at the time of being in the media, and Robert has got the ear of some of the executives at Celtic. So for the ordinary fan like myself, we weren't getting to hear this. We were just focusing on the results, and we were being naive enough to think that everybody's pulling in the right direction, even although there was rumours abounding. But there's, any era at Celtic, there's rumours abounding. What I find frustrating was he had three big personalities here. Now, Dermot Desmond, I don't have an issue with him other than the fact that everybody says, what Dermot says goes. Dermot doesn't have a controlling interest in the club. And I've always felt that if Dermot Desmond wants to take that on, he should take he should take 50% of the club, 51%, and say, I'm the man, I'm going to be the decision maker here. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to be the main man and make the decisions, but he doesn't want the responsibility of really being the big figure within the club. So leaving him aside, that leaves Brendan and Peter Lawwell, and you've got two huge egos, two huge personalities. And there was always going to be a battle about who was the main man. Brendan thought he was the main man because he was bringing success, and Peter thought he was the main man because he was in control of everything within that club. And it reminded me a wee bit of going back to the 1980s, where he had a similar situation between Billy McNeill and Desmond White. Big Billy thought he was infallible, and the fans love Billy McNeill. To this day, he is revered. But at the end of the day, Billy was to find out to his cost that Dermot was the man. Desmond White was the man. And that was a horrible period of time. And I felt that was being repeated all these years later, when it was so obvious that Brendan wasn't going to win this because Peter was in total charge of what was happening. And ultimately it proved that Peter, I wouldn't say he got his way, but he won the overall power struggle within the club at that time. And Brendan realised that his time was up because Dermot wouldn't listen to him, and Dermot was taking Peter's side. And at that point, it was unsustainable for Brendan to stay, and therefore he left.
So we'll get on to the season. I always try and give some context to it of deaths and films and number ones. And for once, there's number ones I have heard of in this particular season. So deaths were June Whitfield, Paddy Ashdown, Pete Shelley of the Buzzcocks, Stan Lee, Jeffrey from Rainbow, Charles Aznavour, Burt Reynolds, Aretha Franklin, Gordon Banks, Albert Finney, Nicky Lauda, and of course on the 22nd of April 2019, Billy McNeill passed away, and we'll get on to that game.
Do you know every week you read those names out, and I find myself going, is he dead? Is he dead? Because I genuinely have this thing in my head that most of them are still alive. I don't recall their past.
Charles Aznavour's, I always find him as a really fascinating story because he was big in France and then had to stay in France, in Vichy France, and was loathed by the French for about 15 years afterwards. And then, anyway, films were, there was a mission. This is the other thing about films. They all keep coming around. It shows you how much franchise systems are nowadays. Mission Impossible, Venom, Aquaman, and another Avengers film with the big films this year. Number one was when the league season started, was by Drake, and number one when Europe started was Shotgun by George Ezra. Two songs I've actually heard of. Anyway, the
Let
season
me-
starts with the Champions League qualifiers. Alashkirk, we win home and away. Rosenborg again, and actually we get Rosenborg twice this season. Rosenborg again, we win 3-1 at Celtic Park and draw 0-0 away. My memory was quite comfortable. We'll talk to you. And then, of course, the AEK Athens game that we talked about with Boyata. So, Robert, do you want to take us through the Champions League qualifier games where we eventually get knocked out in the third round of qualifying to AEK?
Well, strangely, the first game that we played in Europe was on as early as the 10th of July, and this was 4 days before the World Cup final in Moscow, so the previous season hadn't even ended. And I was in Russia for the World Cup, and the night we played in Armenia, I was on a train going to St. Petersburg, packed with French and Belgian fans heading for a semi-final. And I had my phone out, and I was on Celtic TV watching our game in Armenia and getting all excited. Everybody else was getting excited about, World Cup final potential. And I was watching our match, and we won 3-0. And I think what I remember about the second leg is one of the few games, I guess, and maybe the last game where Musa Dembele and Odsonne Edwards both started. And, what a great partnership that could have been for us. But I guess before August was out, Musa was gone. Rosenborg at home was a bit tricky. They've always been tricky opponents for us over the years. And we were a goal down at half-time before we turned it around in the second half. 3-1 was a decent result, not conclusive. But we got a good 0-0 the week after in Toronto. And so that was us into the third qualifier. And I think AEK Athens, when the draw was made, this was a very winnable game. The Greek clubs generally don't have that much pedigree when it comes to Champions League. But, of course, I think because these games are played in August, it's always a bit unpredictable. And, Barkas was in goal for AEK that night. We hadn't heard of him then, but, he did become infamous in our club. And then we got off to a good start. Callum McGregor scored a great goal at Parkhead. Nice sunny evening, big crowds. And I think just before half-time, Lustig made a bad mistake out on the right. This might have been his first game of the season, actually, because I think Gamboa had been playing in most of the matches. And then, we got caught out with that equaliser. The Greeks got a guy sent off with half an hour to go, and we didn't manage to press home the advantage. And 1-1, I think, a bad result for us playing at home, because playing on Athens is never going to be easy. I think Musa was injured. I think Scott Sinclair not available either. The away game the following week, we had no Aya, no Boyata. We conceded early. We conceded another one. One of the themes for this season for me was just the number of goals we lost from headers, just with simple crosses into the box. It didn't seem to matter which centre-half pairing we had, but in the game in Athens, Dirk Henry got crucified. Remember, he's still a pretty young player, quite inexperienced, and we were 2-0 down, and then we made a real fist of it in the last 20 minutes. Scott Sinclair scored a good goal. I think we had one or two other chances, but at the end of the day, we went out, and for the first time, Brendan has not made it into the group stages, and I think there's consequences, I think, because of that, and we've already discussed, made it a lot easier for Brendan to leave, that we were out the Champions League. I think it cost him financially massively. I think a big part of his package was dependent on group stage qualification. I think it made it very easy for guys like Musa Dembele to then want to leave because we weren't going to be at the top table. And I think it will discuss when we go on to the start of the league season. That AEK Athens cost us a bit of depression, which lasted for many, many weeks at the start of the season before we found our right level again. So I think AEK Athens is a team we should have beaten. And maybe we would have beaten them if we played them in October. But, these August games are tricky, and, we could all rattle off many examples of where we have lost to opposition, at this time of the year. It doesn't fit us to be playing games worth so many millions of pounds. I think Brendan, in a way, had been lucky in the previous 2 seasons to get teams from Israel, from Kazakhstan. So they were a step up, but very beatable, and we couldn't do it.
Andrew, I always felt, particularly in the AEK game, there was such negativity coming from the manager that it permeated into the team. And as Robert says, winnable games, he was making it sound as though the team had a mountain to climb because of the lack of assistance from the board. I always remember before the AEK home game, I'd messaged someone that I knew in the BBC and said, Brendan's had a job offer from China. And I couldn't believe it when, like, in the morning I'd messaged this, Chris McLaughlin says pre-game to Brendan Rodgers, so have you had a job offer from China? And Brendan said, I get job offers all the time. But he didn't deny it. And I was wanting the next question to be, did you enter into serious negotiations? Did you accept the job in principle? Because he had. And it wasn't. But that, and then he'd had a go at the board about the whole Boyata situation. It was just an incredible negative atmosphere going into that game that I felt that was contributed to us lose. As I said earlier, you're in amongst the press and amongst these, so the atmosphere in press conferences must have been fraught.
It was one of the most extraordinary post-match press conferences came just before the second leg, because to set in context what happened out in Athens, Celtic had gone to Tynecastle and lost a really bruising game. If you remember, it was agricultural football from Hearts. There was some wild challenges going in, but afterwards it was like Brendan it was as if he kind of brought up a bag of pegs into the press room with him, put them on the table, and then just proceeded to hang Boyata out to dry. I've never heard anything like it. I remember saying, how am I going to get this into 1,000 words? I could just actually say Brendan Rodgers just slaughtered, here it all is, because it was like I almost needed 2 pieces, because he just went on, and he described what had happened up at the training ground. I don't want to play. I want this offer. I'm not making you play. And he went through it chapter and verse, which was his classic kind of deflection in a way, because he was deflecting from 2 bad results that week. He was deflecting from just having lost, because nobody was writing about Celtic losing to Hearts, which was it was a bad day on the back of not beating AEK in the first leg. So this was one of his worst weeks of his tenure at that point. Looking as if you're going out of the Champions League and you've lost ground early on in the league, where Rangers actually, I think, under Gerrard, actually, I think they made they were going to make their best start in 54 years to a league campaign. So it was all kind of closing in on them. And there was also, we haven't talked about it, was also bubbling away about Brendan Rodgers trying to sell Dembele to China. Dembele,
yes. He told Dembele to hold off because he would take him to China.
And then Dembele said all this, and he was sold 2 days after the loss to AEK Athens. Off he went for his 19.3 million or whatever it was, for 19.7 or something, to Lyon. He went to Lyon, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Dembele dollars. That was when the phrase Rangers. And strangely enough, despite all of this, us selling Dembele for that money crucified Rangers, because thereafter they were refusing to sell players unless they got Dembele dollars.
That's right. That's right. Between that and the Tierney one, which arrives a year later, that's what they wanted. They just wanted, what I mean. It's all about the kind of self-worth, isn't it? It's always about self-worth with Rangers,
Yeah.
or
So
neuroses.
when Morelos becomes their sellable asset that they could have then used to reinvest to grow the team, they end up eventually, he turns into an overweight waster and leaves for nothing, just because they wouldn't take whatever it was, 8-9 million quid, because they wanted Dembele dollars.
Yeah. But I mean, that's so. What a kind of 10-day stretch. What a crazy 10-day stretch that Dembele's going. The managers are off at China. You're out the Champions League. You've lost at Tynecastle. It was not a happy time at all.
So Saint, we're out of the Champions League and we play Seduva and qualify reasonably comfortable for the Europa League. We draw 1-1 away, 3-0 at home. So any thoughts about the football on the pitch in that campaign period, European campaign up to the group stages?
The one thing that sticks in my mind about the AEK game is that was actually the last qualifier. It was the second last qualifier, because it was. I think it was the first season we were required to play 4 ties to get into the group stages. And I think Robert said earlier on there that the season started before officially the previous season had ended. It was ridiculous, July the 10th. So when we get to EAK, this isn't even the last qualifying round. There was another round to come after that.
Sorry, you're
From
right.
memory, I think it
Right.
was Maribor or one of these teams that we tend to come up against for time to time in these qualifying stages. So for that point of view, that's an enormous failure. Not just the fact that you didn't get to qualify for the group stages, you couldn't get to the last game to play the last tie. So as Brian was saying there, that there's huge weight piling up on Rodgers' shoulders, and the quality of the transfers that were coming in as well. You think of everybody speaks about the McGinn shambles, where Celtic basically let them slip through their fingers. But Izzy Gary coming in was totally underwhelming. Malumbo,
Yes.
I mean, with all due respect, that guy, he was a decent player at Kilmarnock the previous season, I've got to say, at Kilmarnock's level. But to think that he could come in, I think he was 33.
33 free transfer, and it was almost as if it was like, my memory is the Daily Record ran a story like 2 days to go in the window about, isn't it amazing that this player's still available, and Celtic signed him on a free 2 days later.
And even when he signed, he didn't think played 2 games or something off the top of my head. He might have played a wee bit more, but the perception is that he didn't play very often. So but when you weigh all these things up, the transfer policy, the European shambles, and then Boyata turns in and basically goes on strike. He doesn't want to play because he's angling for a transfer. And at that point, the fans become really angry, because the whole idea that we pay a lot of money to the club to pay the players tremendous salaries that they get in this day and age, and for a player to turn around and refuse to play was beyond the pale, and he should have been shown the door right away. But I understand what Celtic did, because by showing him the door right away, he gets to win. And it sets a precedent for other players in the future to say, well, I'm not playing if you don't sell me. So I really sympathise with Celtic at that point, because they were in a no-win situation. If you sell Boyata, you would get slaughtered. And if you keep Boyata, you're going to get slaughtered. And it was a very unhappy club at that point.
Although Boyata put them back in the straight and narrow, because then he did play. A week later, he played against Hamilton in the Green Brigade banner, not fit to wear the jersey. Then he ended up scoring the winner, of course. That's the way these things go.
And he get booed mercilessly that day, which I don't agree with. I don't think anybody should be booed on the park. You can make your feelings known, certainly in other ways, especially in social media, that you're not happy with somebody. But the treatment he got that day was pretty grim.
The one good signing, I think, was Filip Benkovic, the centre back that we got from Leicester. I think made a very good contribution up until the point where Brendan Rodgers left. And I always felt he was somebody we could have tried to fine on a permanent basis. I thought he showed up very well for us in the never-ending, rotating centre backs that I'm obsessed with about every season. So,
We'd signed Simonovic, and then I can't remember the Croatian club they were at. Benkovic then replaces Simonovic in the team.
Yeah,
Zagreb.
it's
Dinamo Zagreb.
Zagreb. So that's us in the Europa League group stages, and we'll get on to that later. The league campaign kicks off 3-1 at home to Livingston the 4th of August. Then, as you guys have discussed, we lose 1-0 at Tynecastle against Hearts, and then we beat Hamilton 1-0. We beat Rangers first game in September. Draw with St Mirren, lose against Kilmarnock, then go on a winning run, draw at Livingston, then win, draw. There's a lot of win, draw, win, draw. We lose at Easter Road because Brendan can't win at Easter Road. We then go on a winning run and then lose at Ibrox on the 29th of December. We've not had a great transfer window. We've only got Odsonne Edouard as a striker through the first half of the season, with Scott Sinclair can chip in the middle bit. So we've got a striking problem during that season as well if we get any injuries, which we'll get to in the transfer window.
Brian, where was Griffith at this point? Was this when he was having his mental health issues?
I think this is when he was having his mental.
yes.
Yeah, because I think he only had 11 games all season or something like that.
Yeah.
11 appearances. Which
Was there not a banner? Was there not a banner at one of the games where in the Green Brigade saying it's all right to be not all right or something like that? There was some sort of big message. I think it was a Kilmarnock game at home just before Christmas, where they showed some real empathy for Lee Griffiths' situation.
So that run from the start of the season, we've touched on the Hearts defeat and touched on the Hamilton game through to losing at Ibrox and beating Rangers at Celtic Park. So it was a sort of 1-1. Andrew, any specific memories of that run of ties?
Yeah, just the fact that he was thoroughly hacked off. I mean, he affects this kind of, they're great friends and all that. And I do think there's a lot of respect between them. But he get really hacked off about the number that Lennon could do on him. And he did a tactical number on him as Hibs manager. Because Hibs were having a really bad time then. Lennon wasn't to last much longer, clearly, because he was available when it turned around to the end of next February. But he could still do a number on Celtic at Easter Road. And it was like Rodgers hated the fact that he was getting kind of out-tacticked by Neil Lennon, and he was quite kind of begrudging of Hibs win that day. That was one of my memories. Then my other memory, of course, is about losing the record to his unbeaten record against Rangers, and he come in and he kind of brushed it off. It was my 13th. He says, "This is my 13th derby." He said, 13, unlucky for some, eh? Can't he win them all? He was trying to give it the kind of nothing to see here, when everybody was saying, hold on a minute, this was a team that was beating Rangers. Not beating Rangers, this was a team that was wiping the floor with Rangers. And suddenly, they'd won 1-0 with a Cham goal in September. They won, and all the Rangers players had come out. If you remember, Connor Goldson said, I thought this was supposed to be such a great team. There's nothing between us. Yeah, they all come out and said...
I think that wasn't the case, and Rangers may have said so.
I'm just saying they said that.
Yeah.
They said that, and then they felt they were backing it up because they won the next one. They won the next one in the league.
Yeah, and I think, we talked in the previous episodes that over the last couple of seasons, we've been scoring 15 a season against Rangers.
Yeah.
And then this 8 in a row season, the goals didn't go in. I mean, the Oliver and Sam game in September could have been another 4 or 5 goal victory, but it wasn't. It was 1-0. Alan McGregor played out of his skin in a couple of these Celtic Rangers matches. We were unlucky with the woodwork. And at the end of the season, you look at the 4 games against Rangers, we only managed 3 goals. But it's quite different from the previous 2 or 3 seasons where we were just merrily banging the goals. And so they had acquired a bit more resilience under Steven Gerrard And where they had been a really soft touch under Warburton, Murty, and Pedro Caixinha, suddenly they're putting out a midfield which was Stephen Davis, Ryan Junk, Glenn Kamara, and Scott Arfield. Every one of them with quite a bit of doubt. And they weren't a soft touch anymore. You know, they were a very physical team. Somebody like Goldson was brought in, also very physical. You know, Katic, their guy from the old Yugoslavia, whatever, Croatia. So they were a different proposition. And Gerrard had made them, as far as the Celtic Rangers games were concerned, a harder team to put away.
See, when you mentioned Katic, actually, that's one of the other things that I never thought I would write about in my career. I remember going along one Friday, and it was, I don't know if it was before the second derby or was it before the first, and he was talking about how they knew each other. You know, they hung out. He said we didn't see each other an awful lot socially, like him, Barisic, Simunovic, and Benkovic. But they did see each other, and we said, "All right, so where do you see each other?" "Oh, we all go along to St Aloysius. We go to mass together, like on a Sunday." And I thought, you know, I've heard it all now. I'm sitting in Murray Park, and there's a guy, there's a Rangers player in front of me, talking about his social life is going to mass with Celtic players on a Sunday. You know, that's a big part of his social life. It was beautiful, I must say. It was beautiful. It was, sorry, just when you mentioned Katic, because it's one of the things that really sticks out for me from that season.
That is lovely. So
saying, you know, in that first, because the big winter break that season, in that first half of the season, we had lost 4 league games by the time we lost to Rangers on the 29th of December and drawn 3. I mean, it was quite a change from Brendan's first season, the Invincible season. So any of those games that stuck out for you in that first half?
I know we're going to go on to the League Cup later, so I'll not talk about the semi-final. But for me, one of the turning points during the season was the emergence of Ryan Christie. Because the midfield, you know, we tried Malumbo and you know, there was just something missing. There was an energy missing at the team. And I always felt that Brendan missed the energy that Stuart Armstrong brought to the team. You know, he maybe wasn't the greatest player in the world, but he had a great engine and he scored goals from midfield. And we had to replace that. And it's a funny thing the way things work out in football at times, because I don't think Brendan Rodgers rated Ryan Christie. He was on the bench and he would get brought on for the odd 5-10 minute appearance if you were winning 3-0. And all of a sudden, you get to that semi-final and he played Kouassi that day in front of Ryan Christie. Mm-hmm. And Kouassi gets injured, goes off the park, and then Ryan Christie comes on. And you know, as I said, their fate's a funny thing. Ryan Christie scores an absolute cracker of a goal, shows what he's capable of, and then in the weeks that come, he is our best player. He's scoring goals in midfield. He's bringing the energy that we've been missing, and he gives the team a huge lift. And I don't think that was Brendan's managerial skills coming to the fore. That was basically just a good fortune that who's in the bench? All right, bring Christie on. He's the only one left. And sometimes that happens in football. Sometimes it takes just a wee bit of good fortune to turn somebody's career around. And Ryan Christie's career changed totally that day at that semi-final at Murrayfield, because he proved that he was a player and he never looked back after that. And I think at that period during autumn getting into winter, he's our best player. And the games that we are winning, and we you know, I think we beat Dundee 5-0 and we beat Kilmarnock 5-1. They were good performances and amongst some inconsistent performances. But at that point in time, Ryan Christie's a man.
So
yeah, I would. Can I add something there? It's also a League Cup story. So the first round of the League Cup were at Firhill, and I'm sitting in the stand, and before the game starts, Ryan Christie sits down right behind me with Marvin Compere. So these two, Brendan's made a lot of changes to the team because I think it's right for the future anthems. They've made a whole bundle of changes, and Ryan Christie and Marvin Compere are sitting behind me with their foots on. They never even made the bench. And Ryan Christie says to himself, if I can't even make the match day squad on a day like this, I need to get out of here. And so the change in thought, and you're right, Stephen, because Brendan was, if he was going to take things up, he was given Kouassi a few games and we paid pretty decent money for him. But, you know, when Christie got his chance and when Kouassi got injured at Murrayfield, I don't know whether the injury was when he got his testicles tampered with by Stephen McLean, the Heart centre forward. Remember he grabbed him in the goal line, and who actually didn't reappear for the second half. And I think Ryan Christie, yeah, he was one of our players of the season in terms of not just the goals. I think he got in goals, but a lot of assists. And yeah, as you say, the energy that he brings was fantastic.
I think Aberdeen blundered because they had Ryan Christie on loan and he did very well for Aberdeen. And Aberdeen, looking back on it, were mad not to throw an offer at Celtic and go, we'll give you $1 million for him. And I'll guarantee you, we would have accepted that at that point and Christie would have left. Because, as Robert said there, if you can't get a game against Partick Thistle when all these fringe players are playing at Firhill in a League Cup game, then he had literally 1 foot out the door. And I think from an Aberdeen perspective, I think they lost out there because Ryan Christie would have been a great asset, and in later years they could have sold them on the way we did and made a bit of money.
Yeah, he said that himself. But see, the Kilmarnock game, it's funny, because I thought that was the day he was finished because he got a rare start and Celtic lost 2-1 to Kilmarnock, and all the guys who hadn't been playing a lot, as so often happens, they just couldn't find their rhythm. They were terrible, especially on that pitch. We've seen Celtic being terrible often on that Rugby Park pitch, but I thought that's the end for Christie. He'll not give him another chance, and as Saint says, it's like he only got his chance by kind of an accident of fortune.
Isn't that the way football works? Which is why, you know, when fans say, "Oh, X player should have stayed for another 6 months and that would have happened," no, footballers know the next tackle could be the career-ending tackle, and they have to make the decision because they never know. Nobody knows what's round the corner. Easy with hindsight, but when we lost to Rangers. On the 29th of December, that was Rangers level with us at the top of the league. So it was quite fraught in the league at that point. Little did we know that under Stephen Gerrard, Rangers were incapable of playing football after Christmas, which was one of the strange things about the way his teams were. But we have the winter break, so. We'll at that point, and we'll go to the League Cup. You've already touched on. We beat Thistle 3-1, and then we win 1-0 away in St Johnstone. Then we're at Murrayfield, and you've touched on this with the game that Christie plays. We're at Murrayfield and beat Hearts 3-0 at Murrayfield before winning the cup back at Hampden. Andrew, I don't remember why were we at Murrayfield for the League Cup semi-final?
Rangers were the Aberdeen Rangers game because that's where I was on that Sunday. They were playing at Hampden that Sunday night.
Sunday.
That's right. They wanted the games on the same day, so that was it.
Because I think, because it was also they played in Europe the Thursday before, so the two of them couldn't play. One of them couldn't play on a Saturday, another playing a Sunday because I think they'd been playing in the Europa League. So the two of them had to play on the Sunday. So then that made that complicated. But I mean, I know it was great, the Murrayfield Day and all that, but that was a great night at Hampden as well because they thought this is different under Gerrard. We're going to win trophies and all this, and it's like, oh, we're losing to Aberdeen in the stick they gave that striker. Remember the striker they had? Who they said there was an absolute no use on. The guy's gone for about 20 million. What's his name again?
Is that the guy, the Roma guy? Was that the Roma guy?
Aye.
What's his name?
Was it Sadiq or something? Was it?
My mate, who's a Rangers fan, he bemoans the fact that the other fans were treating him that way because there was he could see there was something in this guy.
There was definitely something. I mean, the guy's had an exceptional career. The guy's gone on to have an exception, and they presented him as somebody who's just a kind of competition winner, as if he'd never played football. But they just thought they rolled up. I remember the ashen face of Tavernier. That's when I think he's disappointed. Really, kind of became he's disappointed, you know.
think
It
what
was-
made it worse for him as well was Lewis Ferguson scored the winner, and
Okay.
and the Rangers fans of my acquaintance were saying he's one of us as well, and we should be signing him because he's related to the O'Barry and Derek. So I think that made it worse for him that it was Lewis Ferguson getting a goal and sort of rubbed salt in the wounds.
So, Robert,
The other
you
thing
were,
about
Sadiq.
the other thing about
Sadiq.
Murrayfield was the biggest crowd at a domestic match in Scotland for many, many years. It's about 62,000 for the Celtic Park semi-final.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I've got to say that a lot of people say Hampden gets criticised, rightly so, because of the whole experience of going to Hampden and the poor seating, particularly if you're behind the goals. But 3 times I've been to Murrayfield for Celtic games and I've never been that impressed. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
see it. I
terrible.
mean, for a rugby stadium, it's probably acceptable because it is literally a different game. But I just feel for a football perspective and the travel as well, because most of the Celtic support is all coming from the one direction down the M8. And it means that you get log jams when you come off at Edinburgh. At least when you're going to Celtic Park, you're going to Hampden, you get people coming for the east, the west of the city, and you get people coming for Lanarkshire, people coming for Ayrshire, coming for different directions. But when we're playing at Hampden, we're playing at Murrayfield, everybody's coming for the same route, and it's just a pure bottleneck. It wasn't a great experience, not for me.
It was quite.
but we go on and we win the final, Robert. We beat Aberdeen 1-0, and Brendan wins yet another trophy. What is it? That's his 7th. That's his 7th out of 7 trophies. I think sometimes in all of this we can forget.
He became the first manager in Scotland to do that, because I think Walter Smith had won 6. He hadn't won 2 trebles, but he'd won the Scottish Cup, if you like, and then he'd won a treble, and then he'd won the league and the League Cup. So that was a consecutive 6, but nobody had ever done a consecutive 7.
And I think, Robert, we can forget how remarkable that is, particularly in the context of what's about to happen in the next couple of weeks.
Particularly what had happened in the early months of the season, where, you know, it'd taken quite a while to get going. And I flew back for the final. I seem to remember it was pretty awful weather. It was first week in December. And bear in mind, we'd been without Scott Brown, I think, for a couple of months. Maybe he'd missed a lot of games. And anyway, Christie scored right on half-time, and there was a lot of added on time because there had been a head clash between Dedrick Boyata and Gary Mackay-Stevens, which caused, I think, the game stopped for almost 10 minutes. And Boyata came back on all bandaged up, and Gary Mackay-Stevens not so fortunate. So it was during this period of added time that, and I think it was Boyata made the goal with a big hoof up the park. Christie made a run in behind. Joe Lewis saved his first shot, and then I think Christie's almost lying on the ground, and he manages to loft it over. It's up at the Rangers end of the ground, Mount Florida end. And we didn't really kick on and, you know, sort of dominate. We missed a penalty, which sometimes gives you a bit of the heebie-jeebies when you miss a penalty at 1-0. Sinclair missed one. And I remember it was very, very tense. And we brought on Scott Brown with about half an hour to go just to steady things. And it was maybe a bit of a premature return from him because he did subsequently miss other matches. But, you know, another victory for Brendan over Derek McInnes. And this is a tough game and an incredible achievement. You know, of course, we'd experienced trebles before, but we got the double treble. The previous season was an incredible achievement, you know, might never be repeated. And now, you know, we've got the first leg of the treble, 7 state trophies, you know, an incredible winning run for Brendan in domestic. Yeah, I think we only conceded 2 goals in 2.5 seasons in the cup. So
the thing about the League Cup is as well, traditionally it was never a tournament that was very favourable for Celtic. So Brendan coming along, all of a sudden we're winning the League Cup every season. And I do think when you win the League Cup, it gives you a wee bit of momentum during the season. Do you remember when Big Ange's first season, when we beat Hibs in the final? I don't have any doubt that was a major factor in us going on to win the league, because the whole confidence from the players and the supporters seeing a trophy getting lifted at Hampden, it does give you that wee bit of momentum to push on for there. And that, I think that was the secret of the trebles, the 4 of them. The fact that you get the League Cup, obviously you can't win the treble without winning the League Cup. But the point I'm making here is, so early in the season, but when you get silverware, it gives you that something to build on for the rest of the season. And certainly, as far as we're concerned, when we're the favourites to win these trophies anyway, most of the time, that it gives you a push. And I think Rodgers was clever enough to realise that let's get the League Cup, because some Celtic managers never took it seriously, the League Cup, through the years. Don't worry about it. So don't mind getting beat, because it's only the League Cup. The fans don't like that. It should be one to win everything.
Yeah,
And for that perspective.
Fascinating
problem with
fact,
the League
actually,
Cup-
that the fascinating fact that when Christie scored that goal, and then he would subsequently score in the Scottish Cup final, and he's the only Scot to score in both Scottish Cup finals since, do you know, saying 50 years ago.
Well,
the last guy who did it was 50 years ago. The last Scot to score for Celtic in both League Cup and Scottish Cup finals.
Right, Dixie.
No,
Dixie Deans. Well,
I'd
Paul
go with
Wilson. Paul Wilson.
according to
No.
our
I
friend,
would go
Roddy
with Bobby
is it?
Lennox. Bobby Lennox certainly did it in the 68-69 season when we won the treble.
Lou Macari.
But Christie,
Lou Macari.
Or is it
I'm
Paul
not sure
Wilson?
about
Is it?
that.
I don't ever remember Lou Macari scoring in a League Cup final. I think it is Paul Wilson.
Is it Paul Wilson? Because it was 74, 75.
It's Paul
so-
Wilson. Paul Wilson
It would have
scored
to be Paul
4
Wilson.
Hampden finals in the one season,
Yes.
which is a record that I don't think will ever be broken,
Yes.
because Glasgow Cup, Drybrough Cup, Scottish Cup, League Cup.
Yeah.
Yeah, he scored in the 6-3 game against the Hibs.
Yeah.
Because Roddy
And
said
then,
it was 50
then
years. It's
in
coming
the
up.
Celtic-
If nobody does it this year, then Christie will be the only Scot to do it for Celtic in the past
Yeah.
50
But
years.
Christie, but when did Christie didn't score in the Scottish Cup final of that season, did he?
No. But I just mean ever
The
to do
following
it
season.
the following season in your career, ever to do it. Obviously, because I mean, Forrest, if he scored in the Scottish Cup this final, he would do it. And McGregor he scored in League Cup finals, hasn't he?
No, I think
No.
Scottish Cup, Motherwell.
Scottish Cup
Motherwell
final,
Scottish
sorry,
Cup.
Scottish Cup final. So McGregor's got a chance if he scored in the League Cup final, he would do it, wouldn't he?
Yep. So we get Brendan's 7th trophy out of 7, and also during this period we dropped into the Europa League. We had a controversial group in that we had both Red Bull teams in the same group. We had Red Bull Salzburg and Red Bull Leipzig that UEFA cleared and said that it was okay, that was all right. Celtic, and again we're back to Rosenborg, who we'd beaten earlier in the Champions League qualifiers, so we both dropped down to the Europa League and end up in the group stages. And we end up finishing second in that group and get through to play Valencia. We beat Rosenborg 1-0 at home, lose 3-1 to Salzburg away, lose 2-0 to Red Bull Leipzig away, then beat Leipzig 2-1 at Celtic Park, beat Rosenborg away 1-0, lose 2-1 to Salzburg at home, but we're through, and we've through to play Valencia, where we lose 2-0 at home and 1-0 away. Andrew, your recollections of that Europa League campaign?
Oh, yeah. Well, it became the first European group campaign where Celtic finished above a team from the top 5 leagues. Previously, if you think about it, they were always, if they had 2 teams for... am I getting mixed up with... I'm getting mixed up. Sorry, there was I think because they finished above Leipzig, didn't they?
Yeah, they finished above Leipzig, the German team.
Aye, so they
did
finished.
finish
So
above
the first time
top
they
5
knocked a team, the first time they knocked out a team from one of the top 5 leagues, and they deservedly so. My memory is of that night, the win over Leipzig, the Edward goal, to win it just after Leipzig had equalised. I think is it.
Yep.
I think I'm right in saying, Robert, was it an absolutely stupendous goal, wasn't it? They worked it all the way down the left and all that, to cross it in for Edward. I think
Christie got the
Christie.
assist.
Christie got the assist. Christie combined with McGregor. But I've watched it again recently. It is a phenomenal goal. One of the best goals Celtic have scored in Europe in the last decade or so. So they deserved it. I always remember just after it, you were still getting beers in the press room. That ended, I think, just with COVID and all that. But you were still getting beers, and I necked about 4 before Rodgers come in, and he saw me. The last one was actually at my throat. I was glugging down and I was vaping at the same time, and he was quite kind of. Sometimes he wasn't as happy as you'd expected to be. He said, "Are you starting the fucking party already? You're not supposed to be doing your job." And it's like, well, calm down. I said, you've just done something pretty special here.
Was it not the case? I'm not sure if I'm right here. Was it not the case that we only qualified because Red Bull Leipzig failed to beat Rosenborg on match day 6?
That's right.
And Rosenborg had lost.
That's right. Maybe
had
that's
lost
why he was
every
pissed.
single game.
Robert, were you at that one? Were you at that game, Robert?
Which one?
The last one against
Salzburg.
No, Salzburg. No.
Well, if you weren't there, you'll not appreciate the fact that the place is pretty down, because I think we were getting 2-0, 2-1 down.
2-0 down, yep.
2-0 down, and you just think, this is gone. And I kept saying to the guy next to me who had a radio, how's it gone in Norway? And he said, still nothing each. And I'm thinking, well, you never know. And then the next thing, that way you get a wee murmur, and it leads into a sort of noise, and then a big roar. And the guy next to me, he says, no, he says, and then about 2 seconds later, he says, that's it. He says, Rosenborg have scored. So we almost qualified by default because somebody had done us a favour on the night. But what made it even better that night was Rangers were favourites to go through in their group, and we weren't. We went through by default, and Rangers get beat, I think, the Rapid Vienna. And they didn't go through. So that was, the yin and yang of the Glasgow, the big two, sort of had swung in our direction again.
And you're right, Robert. That's maybe why he was. Yeah, maybe that's why he was.
What was the game? Was it Salzburg? Salzburg at home, where Craig Gordon lost.
Well,
must have been one of the worst goals of his career. I loved Craig Gordon. Thought he was a great goalie for us. He tries to roll the ball out to his left to near somebody while he's been closed down by one of the strikers, and the guy just intercepts it and walks it into an empty net, and that was a decisive goal that night. I think it was the Salzburg game, and really embarrassing.
The Salzburg away game was frustrating as well, because I made the mistake of driving through for a meeting to Edinburgh, and getting back, I missed practically the whole first half on TV. And Edward scored after 2 minutes, and we were, by all accounts, we were playing quite well. And in the second half, the usual thing happened. We lost a goal, and the roof caves in. And there was always a feeling that in European games against decent opposition, even under Rodgers, that mental strength was always going to be an issue. In terms of the fitness or the physical aspect of the game, things were okay. But it was almost as if as soon as we lose a goal, that's it. But we're done for, and that's a depressing thought at that period, because there was a couple of games that they thought we might have been in the verge of getting a really good result in Europe, and that would have been a good one in Salzburg. But, in the second half, the roof caved in again.
This was one of the campaigns that really started to show to me that I loved Lustig, but when you went up to that level, I think at least half the goals where somebody coming down our left or right, putting a cross in, and a guy just running in behind, Lustig completely oblivious to the fact that there's a guy behind him just coming in. I think both the goal we lost to Leipzig and one of the goals we lost to Salzburg at home were exactly that. The cross comes in, Lustig's just watching the cross coming over, and the guy just coming in and bang, header in. And you're right, the second Salzburg goal is the ball just comes through to Gordon. He's at the edge of the box. He just picks it up, and the guy's the guy's still just sort of running through chasing the ball. He's not really trying to close down Gordon. He's just sort of running towards it. Gordon's obviously oblivious to this guy and sees whoever it is to his left and just goes to roll it to him and literally rolls it onto the guy's foot. And the guy then puts it in. And then our goal was, we had a penalty in the 95th minute and then Cham takes it and the keeper tips it onto the post and it bounces back out to Cham and puts it in the back of the net. And that's how we got the goal in the 95th minute.
It was possibly after one of these games then that I always remember because you could come out with the real caustic comments and somebody says to them, what are you looking for, in the transfer market? What are you looking for when you think about when you need fresh arrivals? He says, can we get some new legs for Lustig? That's what he said the one Friday.
What if his last season?
Don't quote me on that kind of thing, But he'd obviously thought...
The other thing I remember from that group stage, that campaign, is that James Forrest got sent off in the game in Salzburg, where they had a breakaway, and James is trying to get back, and he pulls the guy down just inside the box, and he gets a red card, and he's scored with a penalty to finish 3-1. But then, 3 days later, James plays at Perth when we play St Johnstone in the league, and he scores 4 goals in the first half, and we won 6-1. And that was possibly the turning point in the season, that win at Perth.
Yeah.
And I think for Forrest to turn in a performance like that after the disappointment of getting sent off in a European defeat, I mean, the guy's brilliant. I think a lot of Celtic fans have had love-hate relationships with Jamesy, but I think technically he's been a brilliant player for us, and possibly he's the highest scoring outright winger in our history, because you can't really say Bobby Lennox or John Hughes were wingers. Maybe Jinky's still got more goals than Forrest, but I don't know what James is on now, 110 goals, maybe more, but he's to me he's been a sensation, and he's had to see off some competition over the years as well to, hold down a place in the squad. So just thought I'd mention that.
No argument here. No, he's my favourite kind of current player.
So we get through the group stages. Yes, we get through the group stages and we play Valencia, and the games against Valencia are right before Brendan leaves. Robert, you and I have a friend. I remember meeting you in Sarties. So I'll not blow his anonymity, but anybody who knows you will know who it is I'm talking about. You and I met him in Sarties, and he was the person who told me, and it would have been around the time of the Valencia game, Leicester interviewed Benitez and Brendan because he was friendly with the finance director of Leicester, and Leicester interviewed both. And Benitez must have been at a club, I can't think where he was, and Benitez said that he could join them at the end of the season, that their slight favourite was Benitez, but Brendan had said, I can join right away. And that's what tipped the balance in favour of Brendan getting the job. So he would have been getting the interview in the middle of this. We played Valencia on St Valentine's Day at home and lost 2-0. We played Valencia the 21st of February. And then I think Brendan left left exactly, I think it might have been either 6 days or 7 days after that Valencia game. So anybody get any memories of those two Valencia games? I genuinely have zero memory of both of those games.
All I remember was that we'd signed Ollie Buck and Timothy Ware and Jeremy Tolyan all on loan in the January window. And Tolyan immediately went into the team ahead of Lustig. And the 2 Valencia goals that Park played that Thursday night both came down his side, where, I don't know what, he obviously had a new relationship with the rest of the back four, but we got exposed down his side. And then instantly he gets sent off in the first half. He got a red card for a couple of yellows. And I suppose when Brendan left, we never really saw much of Jeremy Tolyan again. But I don't think Valencia were any better than RB Leipzig. Um, we should have had a chance against them. I think when Buck came in, Edward got dropped as well. So there was a little bit of a shakeout, but um, we didn't score in either leg. We didn't deserve to go through.
No, it was a pretty dodgy red card, mind you. I remember thinking. I think one of his bookings was just a ridiculous non. He was really
Yeah.
unfortunate, and Celtic had looked okay. They might have made a game of it, they made a tie of it to that point, but that was them down to 10 men in 37 minutes, and it was all over. And
We
it was
held
soon
out.
to be all
We held
over.
out till the 70th minute in that game, but
Yeah,
there was no way back.
So we're out of Europe, as always, and the league campaign starts back after obviously the Scottish Cup starts it, but we'll get on to that. The league campaign starts back after the winter break, and then we go on a run at exactly the same time as I touched on earlier that Rangers just imploded. So we go on a run and we beat St Mirren by 4, Hamilton by 3. The lone players that have come in seem to have given some spark to it. Ollie Burke, not the greatest player in the world, but he was strong and physical and a bit fast, and Brendan sticks him up front to give some penetration because we've been playing that horrible sideways football, and suddenly we've got players making runs. St Johnstone 2-0 at home, St Johnstone 2-0 away, Hibs 2-0 at home, Kilmarnock 1-0 away, Motherwell 4-1 at home, and then screech to a halt. Brendan's down the road to Leicester. There's been some chat, not that much. Pretty much all seems to be done and dusted and over in 48 hours. I actually remember being at a fan forum thing in Celtic Park the night that it was actually confirmed that he was definitely gone. And it had only been over the previous 24, 36 hours that it was discussed that he was possibly going. So Andrew, you'd have been in the hub of all of this chat. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, really poor journalism from me. I still hate myself for it. After that Motherwell game, Ewan Henderson had played fantastically well. If you remember, it was thought we've got a new kind of playmaker. He looked like the kind of young Liam Miller and all these ones you'd seen. And Celtic were terrific that day, and they'd really, as you say, really reset themselves, because people talk about Rodgers, it was all falling apart when he left. It wasn't. They'd won 14 of their final 15 games, domestic games under him. It was like he'd got it back together. He pulled it back together. But he was asked afterwards in the press conference, "Whoa, you've been linked with Leicester," and me and Alison McConnell, my good friend, were sitting beside each other, and we said, "Oh, interesting to hear how he answers this." And he said, "It's a great club, Leicester. It's a great club. It's really, really well run, great club." That's all. But he said, "This is all just speculation. No denial. No denial." But instead, what he'd gone on about, if you remember, that was the famous goal, the Motherwell goal that was scored. It was when the ball was thrown back towards Celtic.
That's
the young
right.
boy just come in,
Yeah.
picked it up, and he
Stop.
went.
Stop the centre forward. Yeah.
Yeah. He picked it up and just ran through and scored, and everybody expected it to be called back or whatever. But so he railed against this. He railed against the lack of respect for Celtic. And I thought, oh, that's the back page. And the duty editor, sports editor, phoned up and he says, "What's he saying about Leicester?" And I said, never mind about Leicester. It's just nothing there. I said, he's gone mad about this goal. He's gone mad about this goal. This is our back page. What a bloody awful decision making in my part. What I normally didn't go that way, and even though I'd said to me and Alison are going like, "Oh, interesting," I fooled myself by the goal. Everybody was chatting about it, and it was like all the players were talking about it, whether the young guy should be, strung up. It was like, and it wasn't important. I missed the story. I'll be honest. I missed the story.
So saying
I just want to say, sorry, the one league game I remember from that good winning run was the win at Rugby Park, which was sandwiched between the two Valencia games, and it was a midweek game. And it was the usual horrendous game of football at Rugby Park, in midweek in the middle of winter. And Scott Brown got the only goal of the game in the 90-something minute with a shot that he hit it into the ground. It took a couple of deflections, somehow ended up in the back of the net. And then he ran off to the corner and get set, to celebrate. And he'd already had a yellow, so he got sent off. He got a red card at the end of the celebration. And I don't think he scored many that season, but he definitely enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
And it was an important win for us. I have a feeling Rangers dropped points the same night, and what had been no points gap after Ibrox at the end of December was now an 8-point gap at the time when Brendan Rodgers resigned and Lennon took over.
So saying we go on that winning run in the league after the winter break, and then Brendan leaves. Firstly, 3 questions for you. Memories of any of those games, memory of finding out that Brendan was leaving, and then the other thing that always struck me about the speed with which Lennon was appointed made me think that the club knew more than 24 hours earlier that Brendan was leaving, because it was just incredibly... granted, Lennon wasn't in a job and obviously his relationships, but even so, to have all of that sorted as quickly as we did was just the best indication to me that the club had known for more than 48 hours that Brendan was leaving. So your memory of those games, your memory of Brendan leaving and the appointment of Lennon?
The morning, the day it was announced that he left, I was off work, and I was literally lying in bed at the laptop on, and you sent me a text that says Brendan Rodgers is off, he's away to Leicester, and I'm looking at the headlines online. I'm going, what are you talking about? There's nothing in the papers, there's nothing in the media, and yet within lunchtime he was off. It happens so quickly when it was announced, and then with Lennon. I've got my suspicions about Lennon. The Leanne Dempster thing. Do you remember he was at Hibs? And it was never quite clear what happened with Lennon and Dempster. It was alleged comments were made, but it wasn't quite made clear what they were. And then there was rumours that Lennon was going to sue Hibs because this was unfair dismissal or whatever it was. So things had been happening at Easter Road, and it just seemed a wee bit too obvious to me that Lennon was all of a sudden on the market, and that everything fitted into place. Rodgers legs it down to Leicester, and then we appoint Lennon, and everybody's happy somehow because all the pieces have all fell into place. And I still have the suspicions about Lennon working his ticket out of Easter Road, because he's thinking to himself, he's probably got information. I know Rodgers is off within the next couple, maybe within the next few weeks, maybe within the next few months. I want to be in pole position to get that Celtic post. So I have to work my ticket out of Hibs in order to be made available. I don't have any evidence of that. That's just my gut feeling. Because it all just seemed to be too convenient that everything fell into place for Neil Lennon to be made the Celtic manager. And the one game that obviously sticks in the mind is the Hearts game at Tynecastle, because Lennon going to Tynecastle, well, it was never the easiest place for him to visit, to be honest. And then to get that dramatic last minute goal, a wee pattern begins to emerge, because as Robert says there, that Scott Brown scores that goal in the 96th minute at Rugby Park. Edward gets the goal at Tynecastle, and then a couple of weeks later we go to Dens Park. It was a shocker.
Oh,
terrible game of football. And yet in the 97th minute or something like that, Eddie gets the winner again. So in terms of the spirit of the club seems to be okay, and as much as we keep going to the end, we fight to the last minute. But there's you could see that there had been a regression in the playing staff and also in the performances between Brendan taking over and Brendan leaving, and that's something that I think we would have had to have addressed, and he left, so therefore Lennon takes on the mantle.
So Andrew, one of the things that Lennon did a brilliant job, because the club could have fallen apart at Brendan's departure. But something that Stephen touched on there, and something that Robert had mentioned as well about, actually we were on a not bad run. He'd sorted out the early season form. We had knocked 5 past Kilmarnock, lost at Easter Road, but then knocked 3 past Motherwell, 3 past Dundee, 4 past Aberdeen, lost at Rangers, 4 past St Mirren, 3 past Hamilton, 2 past St Johnstone, 2 past St Johnstone, 2 past Hibs, 4 past Motherwell, 2, and then for the rest of the season, when once Lennon
Yes.
comes in, it is
Dries up.
we beat Hearts 2-1 injury time. We draw with Aberdeen. We beat Dundee 1-0. We beat Rangers 2-1. We beat St Mirren, we score 2. We draw with Livingston 0-0. We draw with Hibs 0-0. We beat Kilmarnock by a goal. Suddenly it draws in, and it's
Yeah.
just. But we get there. To be fair to Lennon, we get there.
Yeah. It was a
and-
team
and
that
we-
needed reinvigorated. It was a team that needed, as Saint says, it was a team that really needed to be recast. It was, and people had to go. It was a wee bit like, it's happened subsequently since. You just need you need to flush it, bring in fresh water and flush out some of the stale. That people were going. There were certain people that were going stale, and what I remember about that. Do you remember the opprobrium that was heaped on Lennon in the wake of that Livingston 0-0, because it was a diabolical. It's a diabolical performance.
Is that the one where Ollie Burke missed the worst chance you'll ever see in your life?
Aye. Yeah.
It was a sitter, the end all sitters.
Because it was like people were garlanding Lennon. Oh, he's back to Lenny. He'll get us to. Because remember, this was the kind of treble kind of thing. This was the obsession, was the treble. He'll take us there. He'll guide us in. And then after that, and it was like, what the hell is he doing in charge? Why did they go back to him? Failed manager. Never failed manager, but that was the way that people saw him. And it's suddenly you realised, and I remember writing a piece, I remember asking about it, you hurt because it's quite obvious you will only be tolerated as long as Celtic are winning. As soon as anything, there's a suggestion of anything going awry, they will come for you. That's just what you are in the Celtic sport. And it was subsequently shown, like in the 2 years to come. But he's okay, he's tolerated as long as he's winning. You get people like that.
Yeah.
Was it also not the case that after Lennon came in, that the reinvigoration which had come from Ollie Burke and Timothy Weah, a bit of pace up front, they both got a few goals. But after Lennon took over, he stopped playing them, and he stopped playing Philip Benkovic, and he only wanted to play the guys who were going to be around in the following season.
Mm-hmm.
And so the squad actually shrunk a bit, and guys like Mikey Johnson started getting more of an opportunity. And I was at that game at Burns that Stephen just mentioned when Edward scored at the death, and it was just dreadful. So we did not play particularly well, and I think Lennon had, was it 11 league games and he inherited an 8-point gap in the title race, and we finished up with 9 points, but we finished up with 9 points with Rangers losing at Rugby Park in the last game of the season. So, you improved it by 1 point, but
The Rangers game was a really tousy affair because first half we should have beat the one in March. We should have been about 3 up at half time. The game should have been put to bed, and Rangers equalised. Then James Forrest scores what we thought was going to be a dramatic winner. But do you remember? I think it was right on the final whistle. A mixture of Bain and Ayer stopped a goal again and right in the line.
Yes,
I think
it was
Christopher Ayer. It was a world class clearance. In as much as it was almost miraculous. I remember quite a sad memory for me. My father-in-law had died a few days previously, so I didn't get going to the game. So I was watching it in a stream. And I remember thinking, oh my God, they're going to equalise. They were down to 10 men because Morelos had been suckered by Brown into responding. And was it Morelos of Kent? Morelos gets sent off.
First half.
Morelos get suckered into it and he gets sent off. Therefore, we're playing against 10 men. Rangers at that point were a better team with 10 men. They looked more likely to score than we did. And then Forrest gets the goal at the blue, but we almost blew it at the final whistle, only for Ayer to get that clearance. So you made a good point earlier there, Robert, that I wanted to make, that the Rangers team up to that point had been a joke. Warburton and Caixinha, these guys were jokers. So Gerrard comes in, who is a bona fide football man with a reputation. and his signings initially were very, very good. He brings back McGregor, he brings back Stephen Davis. There's Arfield, there's Kent, there's Aribo. So there's a whole nucleus of players in there that make Rangers a different proposition to what they've been in a few seasons previously. And that I think in the Glasgow Derby encounters, it was becoming obvious that there wasn't that much of a gap between us and them as what
Yes.
there'd been previously. But part of that is down to us no investing. Because we were letting players like Dembele go and Stuart Armstrong go and Patrick Roberts go, and we weren't replacing like we like, because there was a sort of downsizing going on. And I think that showed during the season, and I think it's to Lennon's credit really that he did manage to hold it together, and even although some of the performances were a bit grim, we got over the line in the end.
It was
Yeah, I would think that March, that game in March, Stephen Gerrard did a very Brendan Rodgers thing when they went down to 10 men. He put two players up front. So he put Ryan Kent through the middle, and he scored a very good equaliser against us in the second half. And as you say, Rangers were on top with 10 men until we got a great counter-attacking goal by Forrest at the end. And the incident that you're remembering, because I remember Ayer's celebration after the goal line clearance, and he's up pumping away and punching the air, and he's gone berserk, right? And I think it was Joe Worrell nearly scored for Rangers to get a kind of improbable 2-2 draw. And Ayer always wore his heart on his sleeve. Yeah.
It was a crazy game. It was just like the kind of he was like the Joker, like Brown, agent of I am the agent of chaos. That's the Joker's famous line to the Dark Knight. It was like Scott Brown just decided, I'm the Joker. He must have just watched it or something like that on the telly. I am the agent of chaos. He just flicks Morelos' heels as the two of them run upfield. Morelos turns around, banjos him, off he goes. He's winding up like Halliday at the end. Halliday gets sent off. And he walks, remember he walked right along where there was the Rangers way support, and he's doing all that, that thing he does, and he walks all the way down the touchline. It was terrible, really, but I think I remember right, you should have a bit more class than that, but he certainly
Actually, was that someone who could spot that there was a challenge in our team, and what he was trying to do was create a diversion?
I think he was. It worked. He got them down to reduced to 10 men, and he kept Celtic's the kind of aggressive side, because they needed to be aggressive, and it's like if you're playing on that kind of edge, and he was kind of almost encouraging them to play on that edge because he was trying to draw out that edge from the Rangers players in a way. So it was a crazy day. It was a crazy day, and the famous. Lustig comes off at the end, and his shirt's all ripped. Do you remember that? His
That's right.
Shirt's ripped in half.
So
what was that? What was behind that? What was behind the?
There was just a big. It was like because Brown was ripping the knitting out to Halliday. Then it was a whole melee, if you remember. Halliday, Madden sent off. Halliday in the tunnel, but they all got involved. Scott Bain and all the rest of it, and then you just saw when when it cleared, when the players kind of separated, and then Lustig had this half ripped off shirt.
So we get through, and at the end of April, unfortunately, Billy McNeill passes away, and we play Kilmarnock at home, and in 67 minutes, number 5, Joseph Simonovic scores the goal. Really just to re-emphasise the famous Billy McNeill phrase of "there's a fairy tale about this club." That it happens. So
it was nice that they invited the McNeill family to that game, because I remember afterwards there was wonderful photographs of Simonovic with a number 5 jersey, because he'd scored the winner with Billy's wife and Billy's daughters, and I think Celtic did him proud that day. That was nice.
Do you know what was really? Sometimes you think foreign players don't necessarily, and it's not their fault, they don't necessarily get it. They don't necessarily buy into the law. That's when people think, how can Rodgers leave when Celtic on the verge of the first ever treble? They don't think like that. How can these players not realise we're going for 10 in a row? It's not their story. It's not within them. It's not. They've not grown up with it like us. They don't live and breathe it every day. But having said all that, see the way Simonovic was in the post-match press conference. See how emotional he was. It was really it was like quite arresting to see it. And there's a brilliant picture where you see like him heading it, and the scoreboard says 67, and he's just a kind of second out because it's almost 67.05, for his number. Kind of thing, because he was wearing obviously Billy's number and all that, and it would have been so amazing if it had just been 67 minutes with 5 seconds. Because people said it's not the 67th minute because it's the 68th minute. So you have to write it. You have to be careful to write it after he scored after 67 minutes, because that's when they do the phones up in the like the lighting up the phones and all that for Lisbon. They do it in the 68th minute. Because it wouldn't look right if you see 66 in the clock. You have to do it after the minute, if you like, because it's after 67 minutes. So it wouldn't look
Celtic won it in the 68th year, which was 1960 of the 20th century, because it was 1960.
Yeah.
So that
his emotions
as I say,
quite something that day. Simonovic, he got it.
It was a remarkable. Just remarkable, as I say, the sort of there's a fairy tale about this club principle that could all happen on that day was just.
But we didn't win the league that day, right?
No, we to beat Aberdeen.
I think it was Pittodrie. We played great at Pittodrie, and I think Lustig scored.
Was that
Pittodrie the following week?
Diving
header. And this was his last season, right? So. So he was there was only 3 players that played in all 8 title-winning teams, and I don't know how much Lustig played in the first title-winning team, but, along with Scott Brown and James Forrest, he'd been there since the start. And,
is he not the longest-serving overseas player in Celtic's history?
8 years.
Great start. If that's great start, Andrew. Yeah.
It could well be because prior to the Martin O'Neill, John Barnes sort of prior to the late 90s, it's not really going to have had that many.
Shuggy Edmondson was there 5 seasons, but
and then
Shuggy
held up for years. Shuggy held up for years, and then you get Vikhorst and Larsson, kind of 7 seasons and such like.
It lasted 6 seasons, yeah.
Larsson 6 seasons. I think Vikhorst was 6.5 or something. Was he or something?
Yeah. So we secure the league. We lose. We go to, after we secure the league against Aberdeen. We lose at Ibrox, and then final day of the season, tifo right round the ground. We beat Hearts 2-1, and so we've won 8 titles in a row. Before I get on to the Scottish Cup and finalise the season, any particular memories of those final games, the defeat at Ibrox, the victory at Aberdeen, or anything?
Ibrox was as close as you can get to a God's rubber.
Yeah.
A bit similar to Ange at Ibrox a couple of seasons ago, where the league was already won. And if Ange is not going to take it seriously and leave Kyogo out, why should the rest of us really take it that seriously? But so I think it was more important, I think, for Rangers to win that game and give themselves maybe a bit of confidence for the season.
Robert, you always make the point about the goal difference between Celtic and Rangers in the games and how it's been huge. And yet, from my poor maths, I think Rangers outscored us in the 4 games.
Yeah, 4-3. Yeah.
There's a wee sort of like, looking back on it now, and I might not have appreciated this at the time, but there's a wee bit of sort of concern over the as I said, the gap isn't as big as what it's been. And that's partly down to them improving, but also, just to reiterate as well, at that time, we weren't doing as well as we should have been.
By the way, but they're throwing money. They're throwing money at their wage bill, Rangers. When he come in, I can't remember the exact figures, but I did a piece on it about how they changed in terms of the differentials between Celtic and Rangers. I think when he came in, it was like Rangers' wage bill was a quarter of Celtic's. And really, by the time he left, it was almost on a par.
Yeah, and I think Rangers had learned that, and they learned very quickly under Gerrard, that the only way to make extra revenue, given that they were not selling club at that time, was European runs. And there's no doubt Gerrard's kind of, even in this season we're talking about, he kind of put them on the map. They were, they probably had 12 European games this season. They had to go through a lot of qualifiers, and I think they knocked a Russian team out to get to the group stages, and then I think they were 3-1 up or something against Spartak Moscow away, and eventually lost 4-3. So they were finding their feet.
You're making a good point.
The basis for them getting to the Europa League final a couple of years later was probably laid down in this first Gerrard season, where they found a sort of formula for playing in Europe, especially away from home, which is something that I think has eluded us for quite a long time.
All I was going to say there, Robert, is you're making a really good point there, because in the Caixinha season that he was there, they lost to a team for Luxembourg. I mean, they were a pure laughing stock at that point. So the fact that Gerrard's
Progress.
Yes.
That the one that he was in the bushes and that kind of thing. But the point is that they went for losing from a team from Luxembourg to beating what I would call reasonable European opposition, and there is that's another indication that they've improved, so that they're narrowing the gap, but we're also bringing that gap down. I know I keep making that point, but that we were pushing ahead, we were getting dragged into to making it a level playing field.
So we've secured the league, and the only thing to find out is whether we can get a treble. We, in the Scottish Cup, beat Airdrie 3-0, beat St Johnstone 5-0 during that run when we, under Brendan, we were starting to all of a sudden score goals. Then with Neil Lennon there, we beat Hibs 2-0 at Easter Road. Then we beat Aberdeen 3-0 in the Cup semi-final. And then we secure the treble. We go 1-0 down to Hearts before winning it with an Edward. I think it's an Edward double that we get our treble. And then famously, there's the famous shower scene thereafter. So
was there a
So yes, we appointed a guy who'd been unsuccessful at Bolton and Hibs as the next permanent Celtic manager. So, Robert, your memories of the Scottish Cup run?
Well, I think in the early rounds, I know Scott Sinclair got a hat-trick against St Johnstone, and we've been talking about how much Scott Sinclair had got off the boil, but it was second hat-trick in about 6 weeks, because the game we hadn't mentioned in the league was when we won 4-3 at Aberdeen on Boxing Day, where there was five goals in the last 14 minutes, and fabulous win for us when the league race was still tight. So they did get a Scottish Cup hat-trick as well. The game at Easter Road in the quarter-final was Lennon's second game, so he'd come through the first test at Tynecastle on the Wednesday night in the league, and we went to Hibs that weekend, and it was quite a tough game, but I remember the 2 goals were just thunderbolts, one by James Forrest from distance, and then Brown scored from the edge of the box that was still rising as it hit the roof of the net. Brilliant goals. I really don't remember much about the Aberdeen semi, except they got 2 players sent off in that game, and one of them was for a head collision involving the former Rangers player Dominic Ball, and I think it was Christie got carried off. I don't know whether that was the end of Ryan Christie's season or not, but he got a bad head injury, and we won 3-0, which was a bit more comfortable than it usually was against Aberdeen in those days. And I flew home for the final. It was a pretty awful first half, I seem to remember. And, we had Karamoko Dembele was on the bench, the Scottish Cup final. And I think this is because the lone guys were getting completely neglected. And I think Timothy Weah or something had wanted to go off for the USA under-21 squad on a trip and fell out with Lennon. And Hearts had Aaron Hickey, 16 years old, playing in that Scottish Cup final. So as you said, Ryan Edwards scored in a bit of a scramble. right after half time, and you don't remember much about the penalty incident that Edward scored. But then, Lustig's last great contribution to the club is he's I don't know if it was a headed clearance or if it was the pass of the season, but, Edward just strolled through and lofted it over the Hearts keeper, and, bingo, treble, amazing. And then, yeah, the shower scene. And I remember being in a pub in Shawlands, having a few pints, granary or something like that, and the news came through that Lennon had been appointed as a permanent manager. And some of the guys I was with, their moods changed in an instant. From euphoria, treble, to utterly deflated at, this decision being made. I've always been a bit of a Lennon fan, and I was okay with it, right? I thought he was maybe the safest choice, for 9 in a row and 10 in a row. But I just remember the mood change as a result of, Peter making that decision.
Or
See,
Dermot,
you,
or Dermot making
Dermot.
that decision.
Or
He was
Dermot.
down there in the dressing room.
Saint, your memories of that Scottish Cup run to the final and securing the treble.
The big game is Easter Road, as Robert said there, because we hadn't won Easter Road for a good while, and that got a monkey off for back in that respect, and it was a good win. The actual final itself, my recollection is Johnny Hayes played left back,
He did, yeah.
He
and
did.
he played heroically. It wasn't his position, certainly. He wasn't an aggressive, hard tackling player, but he really got stuck in that day, and I thought he was on the day probably our best player. But the other thing, that in terms of the team selection, Mikey Johnson get preference in front of Scott Sinclair, which I remember being surprised at the time. And it was the first instance of witnessing Celtic supporters, for some reason, not taking to Mikey Johnson. He was only a boy, really, getting into a game like that. First probably big game that he'd played in terms of cup final, a major event. And I think he was unfairly criticised that day because he wasn't any better than any worse than anybody else. And he ended up getting taken off for Sinclair to come on, which I understand, because Sinclair, experienced player, very, very capable player, he's going to make his contribution. But I think from that day onwards, there was an element of the Celtic support that never took to Mikey Johnson, which is a shame, because I think the guy had genuine talent that we never quite...
I think the week before we had played Hearts at Parkhead in the last game of the season, when Karamoko came on for his cameo slalom rides through the Hearts defence. But I think Mikey Johnson scored twice the week before against Hearts in the league, and that's probably why he retained his place. I'm not sure. Was it not Sinclair that got us the penalty in the final? I'm trying to remember. It was a bit of a fairly soft penalty, I seem to remember.
It was a very soft penalty. It was your stereotypical Hearts whinging that it was not a penalty type stuff. Because I think that there'd been sort of general chat amongst managers that I think Sinclair had a couple of soft penalty decisions given in his favour. So the implication was that he was a diver, as opposed to someone who, if he got contact, he went down type thing.
Right.
Andrew, your memories of that run to secure the treble, and then obviously the appointment of Neil Lennon full time, the shower scene.
Yeah, well, I mean, as Robert's touched upon, like the Christie's season ending because of that.
Well, you interviewed him recently
Yeah,
about
and
that.
he talked about it. I mean, I didn't quite realise how bad it was. He's still got 5 pins all over his face. It was a dislocated eye socket, and we've talked about this before, Brian, about how he couldn't actually, he had some kind of form of concussion. He couldn't actually process the questions when mum and dad were asking him. He didn't know how to answer them. It went on for about 2 weeks. So, I mean, he thought he might lose his sight, and it was a horrendous challenge. But a lot of time, guys got away with those. But he did, as you say, Robert. Ball did get sent off for it, which is unusual because they often get away with them. And even the really serious ones. But I remember thinking in the final, think, well, it's got to end sometime. I must admit, I know it was 62 minutes that Edward got the penalty to equalise, or scored the penalty to equalise, but I did just think it was going to be a game too far. It just felt like that for a lot of that first half, and when Hearts scored. But as soon as they brought it back to 1-1, and Edward's cool finish for the winner, you just thought, a guy like Edward, Stephen said, Celtic had maybe been weakened, maybe they weren't quite at the level they'd been before, but a guy like Edward still proves the difference maker, because he's on a different level. He is a European class striker. I know things haven't gone so well for him since he left Celtic, but he was a European class striker. He was the best player in Scotland, I felt.
He had a pedigree. Yeah.
Yeah, the most accomplished. He was the most accomplished footballer we had in that era. And even the next season, when we see it with him and Griffiths combining, but I mean, and the two of them are terrific. You know, like he was. That's a guy who does win you finals.
Yeah, so we secure the treble. Celebrations are go across the green half of the city. Neil Lennon's appointed. I know a number of people who their mood went from ecstatic to utterly deflated.
That's you.
Robert.
That's you. That is.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, I've interacted with Neil Lennon. Nothing personal. I just thought it was not the best appointment. It was probably the most down I had felt in the 8 seasons to that point.
It was excruciating looking at social media that night. It was excruciating. You thought, this is unbelievable. This is the support of a team who've just won their 9th consecutive domestic trophy.
Mm.
It was, but it just, what annoyed me about it is not so much Lennon per se, but it's like you do that knowing the resistance that are within your support for what the decision you're going to make. Now, I quite admire the Celtic board for being almost anti-populist. That's quite a strength, but it's almost but it can easily just tip over into a pig-headedness. Mm. You just want to say, no, we know better than the support. We know better than the support.
And for me, they actually compounded the problem by the narrative around that. We had applications from other people, and we didn't even look at them.
Yeah,
we had other applications from other people. We didn't even look at them because we know we need someone who knows Glasgow and has an eye for a player. And immediately I'm thinking, right. So what you're saying is, in modern football, where an elite manager has weekend, midweek, and is doing nothing but dealing with the first team, you're relying on him to pick your players that we're going to sign. Then what you're actually telling me is that you're a small-time club. That what they thought they were saying was great. Actually, what they were saying to me is, we're small-time, we have no ambition, and we don't have any infrastructure. That's what it sounded. That's what they were saying to me as a fan, because they were saying everything that they shouldn't have been saying, yet they thought that what they were saying was a strength. That's what really got me.
Do you know what I think the problem was? It was the indecent haste he was appointed. See if they'd have waited maybe 3 or 4 days and then had a press conference and said, we've taken the time over the weekend and we've considered all our options, and the best option we have at the moment is Neil Lennon, because, in fairness, he has guided us towards the treble. He's got us over the line in the league, and he's won the Scottish Cup. He did what we asked. Therefore, having considered all the options that we have, this is the best one available. I think most people would have went, you know what? That's probably the case.
No,
but they should
I'd have said that's utter garbage.
Well, the point I'm making
No,
is...
but I agree with Saint, actually. I think it was done too quickly, and I think he was the safest choice. What I was happy about with Lennon's appointment was that it meant we weren't going to get another Ronnie Dyler. We weren't going to take a risk, and we were going to go with somebody. And it'll be a very interesting discussion on our next episode, for 9 in a row. And when we're beating Lazio home and away. And what do we think about Lenny at that stage?
Lenny Ball. Yeah, the Lenny Ball. It's better than Rodgers. Pass. Lenny Ball, he knows how to play.
Your point about the anti-populist, Andrew. Yeah. One of the phrases I use in business is 90% of people who interact with the public don't understand the public. And the problem is 90% of those 90% think they do. And what I think they thought, the fans are on this euphoria, everybody's feeling great. We'll just add to it by telling them there's no uncertainty over the manager, and it's sorted. And it also demonstrated to me they didn't understand, because what they'd done in moving from Mowbray, Lennon to Rodgers was they'd said to the fans for a brief window, we aspire as highly as you do. That's what they'd done. And by doing the thing that Diddy clubs do of, we've appointed a caretaker and he's had a couple of decent games, so we've given him the job full time, touching on the point that you made, Andrew, earlier of that manager is in and is being tolerated while he's winning, and not understanding that no matter what, that manager is not of the calibre that not his fault, but that manager's CV is not of the calibre that the fans now expect the next guy to be. So it's a complete misreading of where the fans had moved, where they'd taken the fans on a journey to the Brendan Rodgers level of eliteness, and they hadn't realised that they'd gone there. They just thought that was, we just had him, it was a one-off. And they didn't realise they'd taken the fans on this journey to that level of eliteness. And so when you then say, so it's him again,
Well,
that's what it was.
Who would you have appointed at the time then? 'Cause I don't remember from that period there being any obvious candidates that were out there that they could have went for.
By the way, they could have gone for Ange Postecoglou then.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't know the list of managers. I remember at the time, in terms of actually achieving the appointment of elite manager is not unachievable. By some, at the same time, there was a graph had come out about the pay of managers in Serie A. And there was only one manager in the top league in Italian football who was earning more than the Celtic manager in that season, that was earning more than Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah.
And what that demonstrated to me was our board needed a reset, that actually we should be aspiring to another Brendan Rodgers level of manager because we can afford the salary. Because what that was demonstrating was, there's a pool of 20 managers that will never be within our reach. But see, the level below them, they are within our reach because we can afford to pay someone £2 million a year.
But I heard an official grumbling about Brendan Rodgers, and this is when he was, there was no schisms between him and the board. And all. He said, "Do you know this guy? Do you know he's put our costs up, our cost base up 60%, because he's bringing in sports scientists and all that, and he's trying to run it like an English Premier League club,
like a professional club."
So they thought, hey, not only you bring in Lennon gets a third, that you give him a third of what you're getting. For, you can leave him with Kennedy and Strachan and such, like you don't need to do it. Like it's not so much downsizing. It's like what they would say is getting our cost base under control.
Yeah,
they're always obsessed with their cost base kind of running out of control. So they're very much, what's the worst that could happen? Are we prepared for? It's a bit like whether you take a tracker mortgage or whether you take, a guaranteed mortgage. You say, how's it going to look in the future? Do you play it safe?
Yeah, but as you know, Robert, I mean, one of the things I remember getting taught at uni was the worst things about British industry, no disrespect, Robert, the worst thing about British industry is we always make accountants number one. Accountants and lawyers are number one, when accountants and lawyers should always be a number two. I remember and because
I don't disagree
they
with
always
that,
want to be
because
conservative and plan for the worst. But of course, sometimes planning for the worst becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you don't invest in the business for the business to then move to the next stage. So by only ever investing at the failure level, then the successes become the blips and the norm becomes the level that you plan for. And then you say to yourself, see, we were right, made the right decision.
I think we could debate all day as to whether, Lennon comes back and wins 5 trophies with Celtic. So if that's failure, I could probably live with that.
I think the overriding thing is Andrew's point earlier. The problem is, I mean, I remember the first ever article on the Celtic Underground website when it was first ever done. Was the headline was that Gordon Strachan was a lame duck manager, and the article was pretty much your point, Andrew. The problem with Gordon Strachan is the fans are tolerating his presence while he's winning. And
Yes.
the minute he stops winning, everybody will turn against him.
Yeah.
And we won't see it next season, but the following season, that was Lennon's biggest problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough for us, because this is the longest episode in the 9 in a row, even though it's not the culmination of it or anything like that. So,
Apart from the Rangers liquidating issue.
yes. So with that, Robert, Andrew, Stephen, I will say thanks very much.
Thank you.
you.
Thank-
Cheers.
Bring me sunshine in your smile.
That is the second 9 in a row Chronicles. It's out every Sunday between now and Christmas, and if you listen to this in the future, that's Christmas 2024. Thank you for the ongoing support that you provide to the Celtic Underground that enables us to continue to produce this fantastically high level of content. Once we've finished with the 9 in a row Chronicles, there'll be more series that we'll be producing that will be out on a Sunday for you to listen to through the course of the week. Anyway, enough of me. Myself, St Anthony, Robert, Andrew will all be back next week for the next instalment of the second 9 in a row Chronicles.
Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love. Bring me sunshine in your smile. Bring me laughter all the while. In this world where we live, there should be more happiness. So much joy you can give to each brand new bright tomorrow. Make me happy through the years. Never bring me any tears. Let your arms be as warm as the sun from up above. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me love, sweet love. Bring me fun, bring me sunshine, bring me